So today, lads, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Azzi Fudd and Paige Bueckers situation, and I just find this to be odd. I just find this whole situation to be odd, mainly because, again, look, I'm somebody that has covered basketball on this platform for a decade, and mostly did stuff with did make content around the NBA, and it's one of these things where I'm like, this is obviously a unique problem when it comes down to the WNBA. But a journalist asked this question today, and I think Dallas handled it in the single worst way possible. So let's take a listen.
Easy, Kevin Sherrington, the Dallas Morning News. Paige announced last year on TikTok that y'all were a couple, and I'm wondering if that is still the case, and if so, if y'all have talked to any other couples in the league about how they negotiate that dynamic as pro teammates.
I understand why you have to ask that question, but we're going to respectfully decline from commenting on our players' personal lives. Go to the next question.
So basically, somebody asked about just a general question about whether or not her and Paige were still together, and they were just like, yeah, we're not answering that question. The reality is that all they have now done is started every single question. They have made sure that that question will control everything. Because let's be completely real. The relationship status or potential relationship status of Paige Bueckers and Azzi Fudd was at least a factor. Or I'm not even going to say a factor. I think a lot of people believe it was at least a factor in her being drafted there. And this is why I've always said it. It would have been better for Azzi Fudd to have not been drafted in Minnesota. Do I think Azzi Fudd is likely going to be the worst number one overall pick in non-Charlie Collier number one overall pick? And the reason I say non-Charlie Collier is that everybody that would have been a senior that year went back and played another year in college. Because of the way that season worked. And it just happened to be a really bad year as well. Like, it was the year a freshman won National Player of the Year. Like the worst Charlie Collier number one overall pick in 20 years, yes. Do I think that anyone other than our fam you could even really justify in hindsight to take it number one? Like, I think in general, it's hard to even justify in hindsight taking anyone else or than our fam, because at least there is that star potential there. And with Azzi, like, her potential might be fifth starter. Like, that might be her ceiling. She might have already hit her ceiling, honestly. And Azzi would have been... If Azzi's taking 5 or 6, no one's questioning this. Like, if Azzi's taken in that Haquez spot, no one's questioning it. And is Azzi better than Haquez? I don't know. Like, that's kind of the level I put Azzi Fudd at. She has one skill that translates extremely well and doesn't do anything else. I don't believe she has any other skill other than IQ and shooting that translates to the next level. And is like she's not even a secondary option, she's a tertiary option at best. So we've never seen in sports, the only time we've ever seen a person who projects to be a tertiary option going number one is Zachary Reese. So obviously there is that question, is like, would she have gone number one without the relationship status with Paige? And it's like, I don't know, but the fact is that it's always going to be a question. And it's not one of these things like she should have been drafted 10th and went first. But in my opinion, her ability level is closer to that of a 10th pick in general, or especially in the last couple of years in the first pick. Like, I think if she goes in last year's draft, she might go 7th or 8th. Like, I'd take Sanaya Rivers over. I'd take her over Lisa Morrow, but I'd take Sanaya Rivers over. She definitely wouldn't have gone top 5 if she didn't go for a super senior season. That's for sure. Like, Jacita is absolutely unbelievable, who went 5th. And maybe a better pick than Georgia Amore, I guess. But yeah, it's a weird one. But because obviously nothing's being said, these are questions that are always going to be asked. And this is why you're like, oh, was it even worth it taking her at number one? Because, like, she wasn't a surefire number one. She doesn't fit well with the two guards. Like, I'll talk about it later, but the coach was asked how to all play together, and he was like, "Oh, we'll see." Like, Maddie Seacrest could end up starting for this team, potentially over Enrique. Honestly, like Azzi Fudd's could end up fighting out with Enrique for a starter spot, and it's really just the way I'm looking at things. I'm like, it just is not an ideal situation for anyone to deal with, because I'm gonna be completely real here. I couldn't give a flying fuck about any sort of player's relationship status as long as they play well. I don't think it matters. And I don't think in general most teams give a damn. But like, this is also an organization. Let's not forget, the GM heavily implied they only traded for Alyssa Smith so that they could get Dejanay Carrington. He heavily implied that. I'm not saying it's what happened. Kurt Miller heavily implied a year ago that he traded for a player because he wanted to get their partner at the time. So now it's like people are questioning whether or not they only drafted somebody because of their relationship status towards the best player on the team to make the best player on the team happy. And the fact is, like, there's rumors on social media that, they're no longer together. And if I'm being honest, I don't actually care. And I don't think any basketball person actually cares. Because let's be real, like, there's no question about Azzi Fudd and Paige Bueckers are professionals. If that ends up happening, I have no doubt about it that it's not going to affect them on the court. Like, they are absolutely professionals. They're not going to let it fuck them. That being said, because of a refusal to answer these questions, all it's going to do is make more and 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 more people ask them. And that's the problem, is the Wings are obviously not letting any reporters ask the questions. And even if it's framed in a way of like, have you talked to any other couples on how to like navigate that, which is important. Because let's be real, like, for every Courtney Vandersloot and Ali Quigley that have won a championship, like, to act like there hasn't been situations where players have broken up and it's affected either themselves or other players or teams negatively. Like, there have been situations, but at the end of the day, look, none of it matters as long as they're playing well together. And the question will never stop, though. The media are trying to get their quotes. The Dallas Wings are not going to let the question be asked. And all that means is that they're literally going to, it's going to be a Streisand effect. It is going to be a Streisand effect. And, unfortunately, they're not going to stop the questions. So maybe they're waiting for Azzi and Paige to address it, but Paige is going to be asked every single time. It is the fact that Azzi's rookie press conference has just been overtaken by questions about Paige. If we're being real here, it's part of the reason why a lot of people didn't want to see them in Dallas. First of all, Dallas is not a good fit for Azzi. It's just not. On the court, it's a terrible fit for Azzi. I'm not saying Azzi's a bad fit for Dallas, because Azzi's not a bad fit for any team because she shoots the shit out of the ball. But Dallas is a terrible fit for Azzi. I genuinely do think Minnesota would have possibly taken Azzi at 2. And if Minnesota didn't take her at 2, Washington definitely would have taken her at 4. And she would have been great beside Citron. Or worst case scenario, honestly, with the roster the Chicago Sky currently have, her best fit is probably with Chicago Sky. I don't know what story is, but like, Dallas is one of the worst possible fits for her, basketball-wise. And then, obviously, they're not going to stop asking her about Paige. Just like they're probably not going to stop asking Paige about Azzi for the rest of this season. And I'm not saying that's going to negatively affect the locker room, but that shit is tiring. That shit can affect you. Let's be real. Let's be honest here. During the spell when Dejanay Carrington started tweeting out bullshit about Caitlin Clark, and she constantly was being asked by the media to solve racism, Caitlin had her worst stretch of games. That was when Caitlin had her 7-point game. Like, when Dejanay demanded Caitlin solve racism, and she spent a whole pre-game press conference, she answered something, and they got brought back out in front of the media to attempt to solve racism. She had her worst game of her career. So, like, I'm not saying it's going to affect the locker room, but it can potentially affect these two players, no matter how professional you are. Like, the media making sure that what you do best in basketball isn't the main story can negatively affect you no matter who you are. And I just hope it doesn't get to that stage. And because at the end of the day, I couldn't give a flying fuck about who's with who as long as, 3-pointers keep going in at a 45% rate from Azzi.